Have you ever just held everything together in the moment and then fallen apart later? Have you ever smiled at people but internally sort of felt like Nina from Offspring and having a lot of internal thoughts? Have you ever just put up with a situation but really anxious inside or felt like crying? Have you ever tried to fit in socially and sort of try and wear what other people are wearing? Have you ever tried to sort of be part of a group but felt on the outside? Well, I think we've all done that. And many girls and boys on the spectrum do a thing that I call a veneer of coping, which is where they hold it all together but have a meltdown, shutdown, or nearly a breakdown later. Now, I know many of you would have seen that little analogy of the duck going across the water smoothly and underneath paddling. Well, I think we all do these things at times in our lives. But imagine if every day felt like that. Imagine putting yourselves in a child's shoes, whether they're primary or secondary or even going to work, where they have to all day mask their sensory challenges, mask their social challenges, where they have to have a veneer of coping, even though inside they are completely feeling overwhelmed, where they don't know, what to do. And so they're worried and often compensate by being well-behaved, a hard worker, gifted, eager to please, compliant. That's what people tend to see. But their loved one sees something completely different. Those of you who've done my workshops, I often say, we've all had a family member visit or a friend come and stay, and we tidy the house and make it all look lovely, and we put our best foot forward and we're sweet as pie, and then smile at them, yes, lovely, lovely. And then when they leave, we fall in a heap. For many of my children, that is what school feels like all day. They are trying to put their best foot forward. They are doing it, though, not just one day for a guest or a few days, day after day after day. Sorry, I get emotional because I get emails from parents all the time whose kids do this. Like, I had a beautiful mum send me an email saying, she's like, I'm reaching out in desperation. My boy keeps all his worries in all day and he gets home and explodes. How do we help him best? I don't mean to sound selfish, but it's really exhausting because it's like having a battle each afternoon and night. She's absolutely right. This is autism burnout, not just for the child, for the adults too. I have seen this where parents ring the school in desperation saying, "What happened today?" The school say, "We saw nothing." No, we didn't see any sign. He was fine or she was fine. Now, this isn't fine. If a child is completely different in different environments, we need to try and work out what's going on and what we can do to address it. So this podcast is about masking, or what I call a veneer of coping, because it just is a veneer. They smile, they do the right thing, but underneath they're paddling, and this is exhausting. And it's only a veneer because when they get home or with their loved ones, they will often explode. Now, sometimes this actually can be with their teacher assistant. Often they hold it together, teacher assistant walks in the room and boom, you get an explosion. But again, that is someone, a supportive, loving person in their life. So I would love you to have a think. If you've got students that you're like, they seem different at home to school. Autism spectrum used to be called childhood schizophrenia. And that was a terrible label. But sometimes I have worked with children who are so different at home to school. I can see why that label was used. And, I don't really like to use the word label in that way, but I think it's important to remember that some of our children and students can be very different for different people. And we have to help them find their sense of self, really, where they're comfortable, because otherwise they are going to get autism burnout. And really, it's exhausting having to mask. Often it's masking anxiety. Often it's masking social confusion. I have seen it in children where it was bullying and nobody knew that that's what was going on. I have seen it as like panic attacks nearly. and often shows up as a need for perfectionism and high anxiety, wanting to get everything right. Or children who have constant stomach aches and always got a sore tummy, or excessive worrying. At the end of the day, all of these things we must take as signs of things we need to address and what we can put in place. Because long term, this isn't sustainable. And not only will the child get burnt out, so will the family if they're coming home and having massive explosions. So in this podcast, I really do want to help you with what to do and sort of point out some of the things I've seen over the years that make a difference. Now, as always, not every strategy works for everybody. Strategies wear out. A lot of the time people talk about masking in regards to the girls, and I agree it's more common in girls, but I see it in a lot of boys too. I also wanted to point out there's a difference between masking and copying. A lot of my kids use copying to try and fit in, and we all do that. But when you're copying, it's often a tool, like watching other people helps us. We all do that. We use it as feedback. Can I say, though, just as a little side note, some of my kids copy the wrong kids. I have kids who copy behavior because that stands out. It's noticeable. And often kids are getting attention for that. So they want attention. So if you're getting kids who are copying the wrong behaviors, swearing, I don't know, have a think, but, getting in with the wrong crowd, I guess is how I'd describe it, then I would consider looking at my developing social skills book and really thinking about, or any social skills, how you can help them socially. Because often that's just, I want to make friends, I want to be part of a group, not so much the masking, more the, I want to be, included, and I want to have connection, and they're looking for connection, and any connection's fine. They don't mind it's with the kids who are suspended every week because at least they're with those kids, dare I say, the breakfast club. So have a think about something like that, what can we do to develop social skills? But as always, social skills aren't just about the kids who are neurodiverse. You also need to make sure the peer group are supportive of their different way of engaging. Because if you're trying to make the child fit in socially and be neurotypical socially, then it does become masking, doesn't it? They're trying to mask, whereas I would prefer they're comfortable with who they are and the way they fit in. So the difference is when they are masking, they are trying to be neurotypical and they feel the pressure to conform. They are pretending to understand. And in some children, they are masking their autism. And that has a cost because for them, they're not actually embracing their autistic identity, as Dean Beadle talks about. And I'll make sure I link to Dean's podcast on embracing his autistic identity. But I would encourage you to listen to that podcast or follow some mentors on Facebook like the ICANN Network, Yellow Ladybugs, ICANN, Dean Beadle, Chris Borneo, Autistic Not Weird. And I've interviewed many of those people on this podcast and hear that lived experience of really how dangerous it can be to try and fit in, because that you just can't sustain it. And we know this can end up with self-esteem and mental health issues. But in my experience, actually ends up with meltdowns and behaviour and this autistic burnout I was talking about. So I would much rather the child had a good sense of themselves and that families and carers understand, and teachers, that they need some breaks in the day. Honestly, that's what I would be considering. How can I give them a social and sensory break? The things I talk about, 25 minutes work, 5-minute break, but that's away from everybody, or they might need longer than that. I want you to just take a moment and think, why do we have recess and lunch? Why do we have breaks in our day? Why do you get a lunch break? Just have a little think for a second. Why do we do that? Well, the purpose is often to get refreshed, to actually have a little bit of downtime, to get to be yourself, to not have to conform in many ways, although there might be, rules or boundaries. Really, you get to relax. For many of my students, their playground is more exhausting than the classroom, or as exhausting. I have children who come back in from the playground absolutely exhausting from trying to fit in socially, trying to manage their emotions, trying not to explode. Things go wrong and they have that veneer of coping. You mightn't even see when they come back in from recess and lunch how stressful that was. And for some of my students, you see it. That's a different group of kids. But for my kids who come back in, it's like all was fine. But when you go out in the playground and watch, you can see that, going up to groups, trying to find friends, or they've got a group of friends that don't really make sense. Like, why does that child gravitated to that group of children? And it might be this veneer of coping, the trying to copy or mask the other children. So very often I think it's really important to understand that for many of our children, if they are masking, we need to put in place some things to help them. We need to check in with them regularly. And I mean finding supportive adults or people they love. It might be, I've had it be the grounds person. I've had it being the music teacher. Finding someone to check in with them regularly and just discreetly check in how they're going. Or you might actually just need to learn their triggers, notice the signs. Those of you who have done my courses will know I talk about the 3 stages of a meltdown. Often it's something subtle like a change of body posture or the way they're talking to you. So often these signs you might need to get really good at noticing these slight signs, these changes. You might actually really need to establish a safe haven. You might say, we're not going to send them out at recess. Instead, they can stay inside and read their Harry Potter book or play with their Star Wars Lego. That if we want to give them a true break, we need to do that. Now, here is a problem. A lot of my kids who mask or do the veneer of coping don't want to miss out. They are so desperate to fit in with everyone. You're going to have to be really subtle how you give them that break. But they might just need to come in 10 minutes before the rest of the class and help you with some jobs. But it's really hard. I'm not saying this is easy because they will say, I'm fine. No, I don't want to miss out. I want to be out there. They're so desperate to be out with everyone. So if that isn't going to work, then parents, unfortunately, you're going to have to think, how do I stop those meltdowns when they get in the car, or shutdowns, or just explosions, actually? So I would say having a snack, because these are often my kids who don't eat too. I had a little boy years ago who didn't want to eat his lunch because he couldn't find his friends in the playground because everyone had the same hat and uniform on. So he'd throw his lunch in the bin. So by the time he got picked up, not only was he exhausted from trying to fit in socially and sensory, he hadn't eaten all day. So building in some snack times for him, not eating at the same time as everyone else, made a difference. So parents, having in the car a snack, having a drink in the car, not asking any questions, maybe having on music they like, or if they have siblings in the car, making sure the siblings aren't sitting too close if possible, or having something that they can have in their hands to help them have that downtime. No demands, accepting that the smallest thing can set them off. So not stopping to get a litre of milk on the way home like one of my mums did once. The smallest thing is going to be really hard for them. So I think what's really important is knowing what their comfort items are. Maybe it's a sensory tool, maybe it's a drink, maybe it's food. Parents letting them have what Anna Tellermans calls defrag time, which is she'd let her son just come in and go on the computer for an hour. There was no point talking to him for the first hour he came home. And those of you who work with adults and have Anna and my new book, A Manual to Provide Support and Care, I've got it here. On page 65, we've talked about the spoon theory, which is what Anna has used with her son Daniel, that visual of how many spoons you've got, and he could actually report where he was at, which is what I believe the other thing is, teaching children about their own emotions, letting them know where it feels in their body. Those of you who've done my emotional regulation course know that course is full of practical time savers and worksheets and activities to help children recognize their own emotions and how to manage those emotions, those take a breaks, those knowing that feeling in their body that not wanting to talk to people actually is a sign of anger or anxiety, helping them identify this, journaling so they start to see when they were feeling certain ways. So I highly recommend, if you have done mine or Tony's course, the emotional regulation course is meant to build on that course, but people have done it on without having done mine or Tony's courses, and you're welcome to do it too. The reason for that is I believe children need emotional literacy. Just like we learn reading and writing, children need to learn about their emotions. Stuffing their emotions down is only going to lead to burnout. They need to know that building with Lego makes them feel good, or doing a drawing, and they need to be able to ask for time to do that. They need to, embrace their autistic identity and recognize that when emotions come up, what they need to do might be different to their friends, that we are all different. And helping children identify their emotions is part of that. Now, the reason that I had made the emotional regulation course was based on the number of children who were suspended, expelled, or out of class because of emotional outbursts, really, and meltdowns. But actually, I think for children who have a veneer of coping, this course is just as important for them, that you actually teach them about their emotions and how to manage their emotions and how to act when they feel the emotions, what they can do. Because so often pushing emotions down is only going to end up in meltdown later. So I think having an area they can retreat to when they return home from busy socials or family outings or school. Don't ask questions. I have found questions just end up in an explosion. So really minimizing your questions, but allowing time for them to recharge during the day. So talking to the school about how can we build in recharge moments. Parents, you mightn't like this one, but I've found it really works over the years. Having a pet. Some of my children having that unconditional love of a dog or a cat or a guinea pig or a rabbit, or, some of my kids, reptiles, lizards, snakes, having something they can go and engage with that doesn't require social or sensory really, but gives them that input and interaction that they're seeking, because that's why these kids don't want to miss out often. They love interaction. They want to be part of it. They're highly aware of that. They'll often tell you they're shy. I wouldn't necessarily believe that, because I have seen kids who said they're shy, and again, that's just their masking and veneer of coping, because I've seen those kids shine and they're not really shy. They're just unsure. I guess that's a better word for it. I also believe at school we need to think about who we compare them with socially that allows them to be themselves, that they don't have to be so exhausted trying to fit in. And I hate that term fitting in, but you've all done it. Let's not sugarcoat it. We've all tried to fit in at times. So putting them with kids who are really supportive, understanding, who bring out the best in this kid, that you see them laughing naturally and having fun. Now, this mightn't be a student they would naturally choose. I have found over the years often they don't choose the best people to connect with. So I would try and nurture those relationships, find someone else that has similar interests, and they mightn't have found each other. And sometimes that's where if I set up a club instead of them being on their own. So a few years ago, I had a group of girls who were really into rabbits. And so we set up a little rabbit club, and they watched rabbit YouTube clips and did all these fun things, and TikTok. I suppose now we'd look at TikTok and things like that. They did rabbit craft. They did all these different rabbit things. Only one of them had a rabbit, but they all wanted rabbits. It was sort of like a little rabbit club. And they weren't all in the same year or in the same class, but they really bonded over that. And it was just really lovely. And I think it gave all of them time for connection, which we all need. It meant they had somewhere to go. They were with other kids who love rabbits as much as them. So have a think. Is it a Lego club? Is it some of my secondary schools have set up Fortnite where they can come and play Fortnite at lunchtime and be with like-minded peers? So think of yourself. If you're at a party, lots of people, and you can find someone who is similar and easy company compared to hard work, wouldn't you be attracted to them? So put yourself in this kid's shoes. What could you do to support them socially? And I think the checking in with them during the day is about knowing what you're looking for and making sure people know, what are the signs for this child or student of anxiety? Is it their perfectionism? Because some of my kids, they become really perfectionists when they're anxious. Is it the not knowing how to start? Is it the fear of failure? They start to, not even be able to put pen on paper. So really look for all of these things. I also think that what we need to do is remember that this group of children's anxiety might be silent, so it mightn't look like that. You mightn't even notice a change. But what you might notice is they're not working as fast as normal, or they're losing things. Or think of when you're anxious, that's when you can't find the car keys or things go wrong. Or they are more sensory sensitive. So you might notice that they're more sensory sensitive. I hope that you're starting to get a picture that this is really hard to describe. And it's really hard. Like, I have got notes everywhere here of things I wanted to share with you. But as I'm sharing it, I'm like, it is very hard to explain. The other thing I think is getting them to embrace their autistic identity. So reading them books like All Cats Have Asperger's, I'm Aspie Girl, All Dogs Have ADHD, All Birds Have Anxiety. For the older girls, absolutely. The book that came out last year, sorry, I'm just looking for the name of it. It's so good. I hate it when I had a page bookmarked to share with you. But I Am Aspie Girl by Danuta, who's been on my podcast. And also Sienna Castellan, I think that's how you say it, the Autism Survival Guide. I had it bookmarked. I'm really sorry, and it's not coming up. But I'll put it in my notes because it really, really is a great book on girls. Now I'm persisting here. I'm like, I have to know what it's called, but my computer's loading. So Aspie Girls, any parents of girls on the spectrum, you must read that book. There are a lot of books out there on girls, but Aspie Girls is my favorite because it has autistic voices and the lived experience plus psychologists and people explaining it. It's amazing. The first book I read on women and girls on the spectrum was Pretending to be Normal. And that book really talks about this masking, and I love that book. It was updated recently, and it's a really interesting read. If you have a girl on the spectrum, I highly recommend Aspie Girls or Pretending to be Normal. Sorry, it's called The Girls Guide, the Spectrum Girls Survival Guide, How to Grow Up Awesome and Autistic. Really, this is what it's about. It's allowing our girls to accept that they don't need to mask all the time, that they don't need to hide their autism, that they are enough, that they engage differently in the world, but that is fine. We are all different, and accepting that we are all different. So I really think any of those books by girls are really good. I know you all know I'm a huge fan of Temple Grandin. I would even watch the Temple Grandin DVD or movie with the girls, but the boys also need some support too. So for the boys, I would look at Autistic Not Weird, Chris Borneo, and he's written some great tips that I've shared with you lots of times, what he wished teens knew. As All Dogs Have ADHD, Freaks, Geeks and Asperger's. There's some great books on my website that I think actually getting them to read those books and realizing they're not alone, and it's okay to feel the way they feel instead of feeling that they need to change, because feeling like you need to change is exhausting and it's just not sustainable. So, as I say, have a think about yourself. Have you ever held it together? Have you ever had a job where you just did not feel like you fitted in and ended up leaving that job? Imagine if your job's school and you think, I've got to keep going here for the next 13 years. Can you imagine how exhausting that must be for many of my kids? So if you know any students who struggle to keep it together at the end of the day, whose parents and carers report that they fall apart when they get home, can I ask you work together this year to try and help the student themselves identify their own emotions, Try and work out what you can put in to help support them, the checking in, the breaks. Have a think what you can do. Parents and carers, have a think when you pick them up, what you can do to give them that break, getting them to communicate where they're at, because some days they're great and some days they're not, which is the spoon theory. How full are they, or their batteries? Those of you who have done Tony Attwood's course, you remember he talked about the batteries and things that fill up your batteries and things that drain your batteries. Getting them to report that. If you do my emotional regulation course, that is a great way to help them learn what fills up their batteries, what makes them happy again, what makes them feel good again. And we do lots of little visual, I've got like things you can laminate and put Velcro on, what makes you feel happy again. So helping them know what makes them feel happy again. But the big one is, I think, is really respecting that they are trying so hard to do the right thing, and it's exhausting. So letting them know they don't have to be good all the time, letting them know that you love them for who they are, I don't know a kid that doesn't love hearing from a teacher. I love having you in my class. Parents, don't scold or get upset with them when they have these breakdowns at the end of the day. They have been holding it together all day, and you are lucky they are comfortable letting it out with you. It's like a girlfriend or a male friend who just wants to come and offload on you. Now, I know that for parents, you are getting burnt out. So therefore, that's why I'm saying you need to think, what are you going to do so they don't burn out and you? Because that email I read to you earlier by the mum, she went on to say that her son, I'm just trying to find it now, would say afterwards he'll jump up and down screaming, I'll be good, give me a chance, I'll be good. Can you imagine? He just wants to be good. And I think for many of our children, that is where they're coming from, a desperate need to want to be good and fit in, but into a world that's sensory and socially confusing. And it is not possible to hold it together all the time. So I hope you've got some strategies. I would love if you know any kids who are doing this, and if this podcast was helpful, please share it with someone who you may know who's living or working with a student or child who is masking or doing the veneer of coping, because sometimes my podcast is just about letting you know you're not the only one. And I know I have included some strategies in this podcast, but it's also just wanting to acknowledge that a lot of my kids do hold it together and then have these meltdowns at the end of the day. And you're not alone. And teachers, if you're getting parents who are reporting this, it is hard because you don't see any of it at school. And I've had children like this that you see none of it at school. Often these children are very hard to get diagnosed to, often get a much later diagnosis because, again, they know how to hold it together for the psychologist and say the right things. So as always, if you're having to fill in forms for psychologists, I always say don't fill in how the child is for you on a good day. Fill in how they are for a relief teacher, or parents, fill in how they'd be if you left them with a babysitter for the weekend, But again, this group might fake it for the weekend, but I hate the forms for diagnosis because they're so negative and deficit. But I do like what Tony says. Without a diagnosis, children are judged. With a diagnosis, they can be supported. And children who do this veneer of coping need so much support and love, and they need strategies in place to help them with their anxiety and their burnout. And otherwise, I think they'll end up with long-term mental health issues. We've seen this: depression, anxiety, agoraphobia. I've seen all sorts of things over the year. I'm not a psychologist. This is just what I've seen as a teacher and what I call a practical academic. So hope that was helpful. Please email me if you've got any questions. I love getting your emails. These are often such a big part of my inspiration for my podcast. So please make sure you email me if you've got any questions or comments, or if you've got a topic you'd love me to do. I do recommend, if you listen to my podcast, you always go and check out on my website on the suelarkey.com.au the things that I'm recommending. I often add extra things because I think of them later. There's often a little video in there explaining things. There's often the books and resources that I recommend. I really do think that we need to understand deeply these things, and I can't put it all into half an hour away. So I often add a lot more on my website. So make sure this week, take a moment to go and have a look on my website at any of the quotes or extra bits that I've added in, those books that I've talked about. Have a look at my emotional regulation course. I know the people who've done it have found it invaluable. And so often it's about giving the children the skills to help them understand their emotions. If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, there's some other episodes I thought you might find helpful. Episode 237 is Tony Attwood explaining the difference for girls and often how hard they are to diagnose because of this masking. It's actually the first lesson of his course, which I highly recommend. Tony Attwood is a psychologist, so he does what is autism spectrum, like who are the girls, like how do we diagnose them? Whereas I do the what to do, which I'm pretty sure is why you listen to this podcast, because they're jam-packed with strategies what to do. So episode 237, if you don't know much about the girls or have a girl on the spectrum, I highly recommend you listen to episode 261, where Danuta, who is a psychologist too, shares what she wished people knew about girls on the spectrum, because they are very different. So episode 261. And I also had an amazing episode with Jane McFadden on girls, and similar to this masking, but her giving a lot of insights and understanding, episode 278. If you're driving, do not worry, they will all be linked in this podcast page. So 237 Tony Attwood, 261 Danuta, 278 Jane McFadden. And if you want to learn more, I highly recommend Tony Attwood's course. Or many of our girls also have a PDA profile. The PDA course would be fantastic. So if you're looking for more step-by-step, if you enjoy the podcast, I promise you'll love the courses. So many people who listen to the podcast come to my course or do the other ones and they're like, wow, I wish I'd done this earlier. So I highly recommend have a look at listening to some more podcasts or joining me for an online on-demand course where you can learn wherever it suits you.